Aside from those 2 title fights, good point, Danny. I thought the rest of the card was entertaining. So let's talk about it. Let's start with Paddy Pimblett submits Bobby Green, goes. Why is Bobby Green turning into a wrestler? I mean, I know he wrestled in college, but the dude loves to throw hands, talk shit, turning it into in a street fight, keep his hands down. What is he doing?
Well, I think he did it because he wasn't getting what he thought he was going to get out of Paddy Pimblett, right? When you sit there and you try and get in under somebody's skin, you assume they're going to want to come after you, throw punches. Paddy Pimblett was very, very calm and collective, and Bobby wasn't able to counter off of what he did. So I think he was just getting frustrated himself, and he shot in out of frustration. And Paddy Pimblett, this guy is honestly, he's making a jump every fight. I thought he looked great out there, and he made a move off of a mistake that King Green did, and he took advantage of it. Paddy Pimblett is making strides now. I was a very, very good victory. But I mean, look, he might have actually been the biggest winner of the weekend, right? 2 bonuses, new contract. He made
Yeah,
Bobby
don't get
King
me
look not
started
very
with
good.
bonuses.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think overall that was a great performance for that guy. I was not expecting that. I was one of the guys that said I thought Bobby Green was going to win the fight. I thought, if
So did
anything, I
I.
thought he was going to give him a better fight.
Yeah, maybe he needs to go back to Bobby Green because King Green made a huge mistake. Bobby Green would not have made that mistake. Nolan, what was your reaction to the fight? It was quick, probably frustrating to watch. We want to see these things unfold a little bit, right?
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, it was fantastic. It was just a great submission by Paddy. I know that the IQ, fight IQ, and the decision making from Bobby can certainly, or King can certainly be under the microscope there. And there's probably a lot of things that he wishes that he did differently. But for Paddy, I think this fight really got rid of some of those detractors that questioned his level of competition, that questioned his ability to beat, maybe a guy. Right, I think King was ranked 15, so he's going to probably enter the rankings. That was a legitimate win. I don't think anybody can question it. It was dominant. And honestly, like if you look at who's up from King Green, whoever Paddy Pimblett fights next is going to be another very, very legitimate test. I mean, that lightweight division is really stacked right now. He brought up Renato Moicano and Benoit Saint Denis. But you also got guys hanging out there like Jalen Turner, like Rafael Dos Anjos. So very interesting times at 155, as always, one of the best divisions year in and year out in the UFC. But yeah, I think Paddy has really been able to he really shook the critics who maybe said, oh, he hadn't been tested. He hadn't really beaten Jared Gordon. He fought Tony Ferguson that was washed up. Like, if you beat Bobby Green, like, welcome to the rankings, at this point in time. And I think that's come Monday or come tomorrow, Tuesday, we're going to see that probably a 15 next to his name.
Mm-hmm. Danny Segura, were you impressed? I mean, it was kind of a layup. King Green gave him, the alley oop. The other guy slammed it. And what do you think is his upside here, Paddy Pimblett? Should we start getting excited, man? Are we being unfair to him?
I gotta admit, I've been unfair to Paddy Pimblett, and I gotta admit I've been wrong this entire time. I am one of the, and I quote here, dickheads that said that Paddy Pimblett was never gonna make it into the UFC rankings, that he wasn't a quality fighter. And sure, like, is he good enough to be in the UFC, which is already a feat in itself? Yes. I thought he was just going to ling around the top 20, 25 best fighters at lightweight, which is an incredibly difficult division. But that's it. I mean, the guy going into this fight, I think at this point he has 25 fights. He's almost 30 years old. He was champion at Cage Warriors. Like, he has a ton of experience, and we never really saw tons of improvement or tons of change in between fights. And yeah, I thought he lost to Jared Gordon. The fight against Tony Ferguson, was against this version of Tony Ferguson. So I just kind of thought he was who he was. And look, we're looking at highlights there of him leaving his chin exposed and hands down. But in this fight is the first fight that we actually see noticeable improvement. He had his hands up, his guard up. He managed to distance well. Those kicks were really good. And he clearly made Bobby Green uncomfortable, a guy that's actually very good and very skilled in the striking department. So Paddy Pimblett is getting better. He proved me wrong, and he rightfully deserves to be in the rankings. And now I'm looking forward to see where he goes from here, because he shattered what I thought his image and his expectations were in the sport. Now I think the sky's the limit. I'm not going to say he's the next, future champion at lightweight, but certainly if he proved that he can continue to improve, then who knows? Maybe he does have potential to go in the top 10 and maybe even make a run for the title.
All right. Well, like I say, possibly we have been unfair to him, but the fights that he has fought, it just doesn't seem like he's getting the best version of those fighters at their prime, and so, but it's his job to put away an aging veteran.
Right.
It sounds
Man,
like you're not sold on
I'm
Pimblett.
not sold. I'm
Don't
not
be a
sold.
dickhead, George.
I'm not sold. You got to rank him because his stats, his overall record, his UFC record is nice. I can't go against that portfolio. But again, controversial win against Gordon. And then Tony Ferguson. I mean, what was that? The seventh of 8 fights that he's
Sure.
taken the straight L's. And then Bobby Green decides to wrestle when he never wrestles. So we don't. That's why he hasn't been submitted, because it's hard to take him down, and he usually lights you up, or at least just keeps it standing. So yeah, I guess I still haven't seen the evidence that tells me anything. I'm gonna jump ahead. Can he be a world champ, guys? Paddy Pimblett. Quick round the horn, Danny.
I'm gonna still be a dickhead and say no, but he is
But
improving.
does he come close? Even if he's not a champ, does he come close?
Man, I don't know. Again, I have this one image of Paddy Pimblett, and I saw him improve. I actually saw noticeable improvements, which is
Yeah.
something that I didn't expect. So my brain is kind of remapping and reorganizing sort of my expectation and what
Okay.
I think of him. But I would say no.
All right. How about you, Nolan? Real quick, do you think he can be a world champion?
Just
If
saying
not,
that
come close.
playing the odds game, I would say no. I think there's still some striking defense improvement that I would need to see. I just haven't seen him. Like, I would have liked to see it in this fight if there was a few more exchanges, how he would have dealt with it. But luckily for him, he didn't have to show off if he's improved or not. I'm going to lean towards no, but I think he could crack the top 10.
Goes.
You can't be good in this division and win a championship. You have to be great. And I don't know that he can reach that.
He did look leaner. Says he didn't let his weight get out of hand. You know, he does. His techniques look better for sure. But yeah, I'm still not seeing world championship caliber. So no on the title. Can he get close? I'm not even sure yet. I guess I'll just leave it at that. And I'll be a dickhead. How about this Gregory Rodriguez? Holy cow. I mean, whatever he hits you with, he is a tank. He doesn't seem to tire. And then we know his accolades on the ground. I'm really, really pumped up about RoboCop. Cool nickname too. Nolan, how about you, man? Let's start off with just what do you think about Gregory Rodriguez? And I'll just give you the same question. Can he start inching towards the title? Like, is he showing you that type of promise?
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Again, I kind of maybe would put him in the same categorization as Paddy Pimblett. I don't know why that word was so difficult, but a guy that can crack the top 15, maybe he can crack the top 10. But I still would like to I have the ghosts of his losses past in my brain, the times that we've seen him beat. So very impressive performance. Christian Leroy Duncan, I think, is maybe a more familiar name to a lot of fight fans, but in a few years that win will age well. It'll be one they look back and say, oh, that was actually a pretty good win. So he's always fun. He's always game. I was expecting maybe somebody to get finished in that fight, but still, nonetheless, the UFC elevated him into a big spot. He went out there and delivered, and I'm sure he'll align himself with some sort of ranked matchup next.
Mm-hmm. What do you think goes Gregory Rodriguez?
To be a champion is your question, right?
Yeah. What's his promise? I mean, great. I thought he showed us a lot in those 15 minutes. Duncan wouldn't go away, but like I say, just everything he hits you with, it's like, oh.
Yeah, I think he's a tough out. I think he can keep on a streak, but I don't know that he can fight the elite.
Man, I think he could knock out Rodriguez with that kind of power. And on
possible.
the ground, I think he'd be formidable against Rodriguez. I think he can be a world champ one day, guys.
Think so?
Yeah, I really do think that. Maybe I'm getting out of hand here. I don't know. Let's continue down the card. 2 other guys that looked great: Arnold Allen, Nathaniel Wood. And let me just say this: Arnold Allen didn't look great in round 1, but he definitely turned it around in rounds 2 and 3 over a tough Giga Chikadze, because a lot of that fight was standing. Nathaniel Wood, man, he couldn't put Daniel Pineda away, and I salute Daniel Pineda. He could have taken the easy way out when the doctor was examining him and he had a cut. He said, "Chale, let's keep going." Danny, man, what were your thoughts on those 2 fights, and what do you think of those 2 Englishmen? Could we be talking about them one day the same way we are about Edwards and Aspinall? We were talking about them in title fights this past weekend.
Nathaniel Wood, I'm not so sure at this point in time, but he is good, and the UK has a nice, skilled featherweight that I'm sure he's going to continue to get victories and go up the rankings. I do feel like at some point he's going to be among the best, but future champion, I don't know. Arnold Allen, on the other hand, that is an interesting ask. I do think that he is improving. He showed some nice adjustments in that fight. As you said, he lost the first, and then he came back and did some adjustments to win the second and third. I think at some point, because he's still fairly young, the division is going to age out a little bit, right? Like we're already seeing the Volkanovskis go. I think at some point some other names will also leave the top, and we're going to get the new blood. And I think Arnold Allen is part of that. I do think that at some point I get a feeling that he is going to challenge for a belt. Would he be champion? We'll see who's at the top then, but I do think this guy is has potential to fight for the title.
You know, Danny, as you said that the other day, I was watching McGregor versus Holloway, and that's nowhere near the version of Holloway and what he became. You know, that was a featherweight bout. He got checked, and then he came back and became one of the greatest ever. So, yeah, I could see that possibly with Allen. I'm with you on that one. All right. How about Muhammad Mokaev against Manel Kape? This fight was supposed to kind of have a big spotlight on it, where the winner could even be fighting for a world title, but they've had their problems with Kape. You know, he pulls out of a lot of fights, I guess, and he's had issues with weight. But he's on point this time, makes weight, looks great. I thought he won. And then Mokaev, you know, in big fights, he just hasn't shown up. These guys have had altercations. In the end, Mokaev 7-0 in the UFC, 12-0 overall. But the UFC doesn't want him, Nolan King. Does that make any sense to you? They're already basically sending him a one-way ticket to the PFL.
It's unusual. I would say, again, we don't know all the details and the ins and outs of what went on behind the scenes, but certainly we have enough evidence also in the public eye about what happened. So I can't necessarily be mad at the decision to part from him. I think it's super complex. I think having a really young fighter who's maybe not that exciting, but also is going out there and beating your top talent, but then also has seemingly, some pretty severe antics outside the cage, including sucker punching somebody after you take a picture with them. Obviously, there's a lot to process there, right? How do you add up that equation and come to a final solution? I don't think it's the worst decision in the world. Like, I see a lot of improvement possible for Mokaev, and maybe he'll finally reach that really elite level by getting competition outside the UFC elsewhere, whether it's ONE, whether it's PFL. And he's still young enough too, where like, who's to say 5 years from now, if he goes out there and he proves himself to be one of the best in the world in another organization, that the UFC won't circle back. But to me, like the antics that were going on, what we were hearing, kind of the admission of throwing that punch, like I can't really complain, so to speak. It's unfortunate for the division. I've always thought fans are a little too hard on him in terms of his fighting style. Like, sure, he doesn't throw many strikes. We know what he's going to do. It's not that exciting. But at the same time, he's 23. And he's fighting top 10 guys in the world. So I was willing to maybe give him some more time to develop into an exciting fighter. But it is what it is. I'm not really passionate one way or another. If they'd kept him around, if they'd gotten rid of him, I certainly understand the decision to part ways with him.
Nolan, you were recently nominated for Best Journalist. So I know you got sources. I know you hear stuff. What do you think might be the version of, and this is all speculation, of he's difficult, the matchmakers feel like he's difficult? What do you think that means? Like, does he turn down a lot of fights? Or was it the fact that he took a pick and then sucker punched the guy? Or what? I don't know. What could that be? Like, just help us interpret it a little bit. And again, full disclosure, I'm not saying you know exactly what's happening, but you might have a better idea than me. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the feedback, or I think the feedback the matchmakers give a lot are, guys that are being difficult about opponents, about dates, about calling for opportunities that the promotion maybe feels that they haven't earned yet. Whether that's, hey, I don't want to fight that guy because what do I have to gain from this? Or, hey, I don't want to fight on that weekend. Can we do it in Abu Dhabi instead? Stuff like that. So there's those sort of aspects. I do think there is some sort of feedback to this given to the fighters that's like, hey, like, I don't find, the matchmakers don't find this person particularly exciting. But that's something that we hear a lot of. And sure, like we saw recently with, I interviewed Nate Maness, who's 5-2 in the UFC. He came to the end of his contract and they didn't renew him. He heard back, even though he had 3 performance bonuses, that the reason they weren't going to re-sign him was because he wasn't exciting. So there's certain times where I think excitement does come into play, but we don't really see it when it comes to a guy that's in the top 5. So I think there has to be more to the story than that. It has to be either, their decisions on matchmaking not aligning, or some sort of communication stuff. And I'm sure, again, if they're constantly running into this issue where they have to have security, there's things at the PI, there's stuff at the hotel, there's stuff at the weigh-ins. There's certain people that I think can kind of get away with that. And we could have an hour-long discussion about double standards and whatnot when it comes to this. But I can't argue with the fact that that's being discouraged, that you shouldn't be punching people at the hotel, that you shouldn't be, getting in fights at the PI. So I'm sure, again, Dana was a little cryptic, but if I had to guess, the matchmakers, there's certain things that tick them off. And I feel like, not being communicative, turning things down, trying to call your own shots all the time, or asking for things that are too, there's a million different possibilities, but I'm guessing that was probably part of it as well.